Forget everything you thought you knew about Caribbean economies. While Trinidad continues to pump out black gold, Jamaica is quietly cultivating its own green gold revolution. This isn't just about resources. It's a high-stakes gamble on the very soul of their nations and their fight for prosperity. Think you know the Caribbean. Prepare to have your mind blown. We're diving deep into the economic battle between Jamaica's burgeoning green gold industry and Trinidad's established black gold empire. Discover the surprising challenges and opportunities each nation faces in their quest for a brighter future. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this deep dive into Caribbean economics, hit that subscribe button. Help us reach 10,000 subscribers and join a community passionate about understanding the real stories shaping our world. Picture this. Two islands, separated by less than 1,000 miles of turquoise Caribbean waters, yet worlds apart in their economic visions. Trinidad and Tobago, where the ground holds billions of barrels of crude oil and trillions of cubic feet of natural gas. Jamaica, where fields once dedicated to sugar cane are now being transformed into something entirely different, something controversial, something potentially revolutionary, cannabis. But this story isn't just about oil versus weed. It's about legacy versus innovation. It's about the agonizing question every nation must face. Do you bet everything on what's made you wealthy in the past, or do you risk it all on an uncertain future? Jamaica's story has always been written in the soil. For centuries, this island's identity was forged in sugar plantations. Sugar gave way to bananas, bananas to coffee, and through it all, tourism emerged as the golden child that would supposedly save Jamaica from its agricultural past. But here's what the postcards won't tell you. By the early 2000s, Jamaica was struggling. Tourism made the country vulnerable to every global recession, every hurricane, every shift in traveler preferences. The agricultural sector had withered. Young Jamaicans were leaving in droves. The country needed something new, something bold, something that could leverage Jamaica's global brand in an entirely unexpected way. Enter cannabis. Jamaica didn't just decriminalize personal use in 2015 and establish a legal medical cannabis industry in 2016. They made a calculated bet that their cultural association with cannabis, combined with ideal growing conditions and desperate need for economic diversification, could transform a liability into an asset. For decades, Jamaica's association with cannabis was a stereotype. Bob Marley's image was everywhere, but the economic benefits were flowing to everyone except Jamaicans themselves. The plant grew wild across the island, cultivated illegally by farmers who risked imprisonment, while the country gained nothing but a reputation. But what if that reputation could become a competitive advantage? The Jamaican government thought it could. They crafted a regulatory framework from the ground up, licensed cultivation facilities, medical marijuana dispensaries, a cannabis licensing authority, research institutions, tourism experiences centered around cannabis culture, even provisions for Rastafarians to grow cannabis for sacramental purposes, finally acknowledging the religious significance that had been criminalized for generations. The response was immediate. Within years, dozens of companies obtained licenses. International investors began circling, attracted by Jamaica's first-mover advantage and globally recognized brand. Small farmers who'd been cultivating illegally suddenly had a path to legitimacy. The University of the West Indies established research programs. Cannabis cafes opened in Kingston and Montego Bay. Tourists began arriving specifically for marijuana-related experiences. The economic potential seemed staggering. Industry analysts projected Jamaica's legal cannabis market could be worth hundreds of millions annually. Some forecasts suggested billions once export markets opened. Jobs would be created not just in cultivation, but in processing, distribution, research, tourism, and ancillary services. But potential and reality are very different things. The green gold rush faced immediate obstacles. International banking restrictions meant cannabis companies struggled to access financial services. Export markets remained largely closed. The regulatory framework was complex and expensive, pricing out many small farmers. Large foreign companies dominated the licensed industry, leading to accusations that Jamaica was simply exchanging one form of economic exploitation for another. Infrastructure challenges made large-scale operations difficult, and the global cannabis industry was evolving rapidly, with Canada and numerous U.S. states creating massive legal markets that dwarfed Jamaica's nascent industry. Yet something profound was happening. Jamaica wasn't just creating a cannabis industry. It was reimagining its entire economic identity. Renewable energy projects were sprouting across the island. Technology startups were emerging in Kingston. The country was positioning itself as a hub for business process outsourcing. Agricultural innovation was returning. The green gold wasn't just cannabis. It was a metaphor for broader transformation, a shift from depending on traditional agriculture and tourism toward a diversified economy built on innovation, branding, and calculated risk-taking. But as Jamaica wrestled with building its future, Trinidad faced its own reckoning with the past. Trinidad and Tobago's wealth literally bubbles up from beneath the ocean floor. Oil was discovered there in 1866, making it one of the oldest petroleum-producing countries in the world. For over a century and a half, black gold has defined this twin island nation's economy, its politics, its very sense of self. Walk through Port of Spain and you'll see the legacy everywhere. Modern highways, gleaming office towers, a standard of living that was the envy of the Caribbean. At its peak, energy sector revenues accounted for roughly 40% of Trinidad's GDP and over half of government income. Natural gas became the crown jewel. Trinidad developed one of the world's most sophisticated liquefied natural gas industries. The country became a regional energy powerhouse. For a while, it seemed perfect. Why diversify when you're sitting on trillions of dollars worth of resources? But every boom contains the seeds of its own decline. By the 2010s, warning signs were flashing. Oil and gas production was declining as fields matured. Exploration had slowed. Global energy markets were becoming volatile. The rise of renewable energy threatened long-term demand, and decades of energy wealth had created an economy dangerously dependent on a single sector. This is the resource curse. When a country becomes so reliant on extracting natural resources that other sectors atrophy, innovation stagnates, and the economy becomes vulnerable to price shocks and depletion. Trinidad had fallen into the trap that ensnared petroleum producers from Venezuela to Nigeria. The government recognized the problem. For years, officials talked about diversification. Plans were drafted, incentives were offered, speeches were given, but meaningful change remained elusive. Why? Because diversification is brutally hard when you're wealthy from resources. Why would talented entrepreneurs struggle to build startups when they could earn comfortable salaries in the energy sector? Why would the government invest heavily in new industries when energy revenues could fund social programs? The very wealth that made Trinidad successful also made transformation difficult. Some efforts gained traction. The country positioned itself as a financial services hub. Manufacturing sectors like food processing grew modestly. Industrial parks were established. Business process outsourcing found a foothold, but these remained small relative to the energy sector. Meanwhile, Jamaica was making different choices. Where Trinidad offered incremental incentives, Jamaica was placing big bets. The cannabis industry was just the most visible. Behind it lay a broader strategy. The government streamlined business registration. It invested in digital infrastructure. It courted tech companies. It pushed renewable energy hard, setting ambitious targets to reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels. The contrast was striking. Trinidad's strategy was defensive. Maintain energy while slowly building alternatives. Jamaica's strategy was offensive. Actively build new industries now, even if they disrupt existing structures, because waiting means falling further behind. Both approaches had merit. Both had risks. Trinidad's path was safer but potentially left the country vulnerable to sudden shocks. Jamaica's path was riskier but potentially more rewarding. But if the bets failed, Jamaica would have expended precious resources with little to show. Two nations, two philosophies, two gambles on the future, and hovering over both was the greatest challenge of the 21st century. Climate change doesn't care about your economic strategy. The warming planet poses existential questions for every Caribbean nation. For Jamaica, the challenge is immediate. Agriculture depends on rainfall patterns becoming increasingly erratic. Tourism infrastructure clusters along coastlines vulnerable to rising seas and intensifying hurricanes. Cannabis plants require reliable water supplies that climate change threatens. Hurricane season used to be predictable. Now it's a rolling crisis. Storms are intensifying. When a major hurricane strikes, it destroys crops, devastates tourism facilities, and sets back economic progress by years. Jamaica's green gold strategy must contend with this. Cannabis cultivation requires significant water, increasingly scarce during droughts. Outdoor growing exposes crops to extreme weather. Infrastructure must now be designed for resilience, increasing costs. But here's the paradox. The same pressures creating challenges are creating opportunities. Jamaica's push into renewable energy isn't just about diversification. It's about survival. Solar and wind power reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels. Energy independence means greater economic resilience. And positioning as a green economy leader creates competitive advantages in a world demanding sustainability. Some Jamaican growers are implementing regenerative agriculture practices. The industry's high value per acre means less land needs cultivation. Cannabis tourism could be packaged with ecotourism, but sustainability requires infrastructure, investment, and institutional capacity that Jamaica is still building. Now shift to Trinidad. If Jamaica faces climate challenges, Trinidad faces a climate crisis of identity. This nation became wealthy extracting and exporting fossil fuels. Its entire economic model is built on substances that contribute to the climate change now threatening the Caribbean. Trinidad is simultaneously victim and perpetrator. The cognitive dissonance is profound. The energy sector employs tens of thousands and supports countless others. Simply shutting it down isn't an option without economic catastrophe. Yet continuing becomes increasingly untenable as global pressure mounts to transition away from fossil fuels. International climate commitments are tightening. Demand for oil and gas may peak within decades as renewable energy becomes cheaper. The very assets Trinidad depends on could become stranded as the world moves away from fossil fuels. Trinidad faces an impossible dilemma. How do you transition away from the industry that made you wealthy when you depend on that wealth to fund the transition? How do you develop new economic engines when the old one generates most revenue? Some progress is happening. Trinidad has explored carbon capture technology. The country has invested in natural gas as a bridge fuel. There are discussions about pivoting energy expertise toward renewable energy. But these efforts remain modest compared to the scale of transformation required. Trinidad is trying to have it both ways, maintaining fossil fuels while gesturing toward sustainability. It's understandable given constraints. It's also likely inadequate for the speed of change the climate crisis demands. The contrast with Jamaica is sharp. Neither country is a climate leader, but their trajectories point in different directions. Jamaica is actively working to reduce its carbon footprint and build green industries. Trinidad is struggling to imagine an economy beyond fossil fuels. Jamaica's green gold strategy faces sustainability questions beyond climate. Can the cannabis industry remain viable as competition intensifies? Will the regulatory framework adapt? Can small farmers benefit, or will foreign corporations capture most value? Trinidad's questions cut deeper. When oil and gas run out or become uneconomical, what will replace the revenues? Will the country have successfully diversified or face economic collapse? Can Trinidad avoid the fate of Venezuela? Both nations are navigating futures filled with uncertainty. Both are making decisions that will reverberate for decades. Behind every statistic are millions of lives being shaped by economic forces beyond their control. The divergent paths aren't just creating different balance sheets. They're creating different societies. Walk through Kingston and you'll hear possibility mixed with frustration. Young Jamaicans talk about cannabis with hope and skepticism. Some have found employment in cultivation facilities. Others have invested in cannabis startups. Still others remain locked out, watching as foreign investors capture opportunities. The social impact cuts multiple ways. Legitimizing cannabis has reduced criminal justice burdens. Rastafarian communities finally have legal recognition after decades of persecution. But legalization created new inequalities. The legal industry is dominated by those with capital and connections, while small farmers struggle to transition. Most Jamaicans can't easily access legal cannabis, while tourists can visit dispensaries designed for them. There's bitter irony in a plant associated with Jamaica becoming a premium product priced beyond reach of many Jamaicans. Yet there's undeniable energy. Jamaica is a place where things are changing, where the future is being actively constructed. Young people who might have left are staying. Diaspora Jamaicans are returning. International attention focuses on Jamaica as an economic innovator. Now contrast Trinidad's atmosphere. There's prosperity Jamaica can only envy. Higher incomes, better infrastructure. The oil wealth created a comfortable middle class and funded social programs. But there's also growing anxiety. Young Trinidadians wonder what happens when oil runs out. Brain drain pulls talented people abroad. The economy feels static, resistant to innovation. Entrepreneurship is less vibrant because the energy sector offers secure employment that saps hunger. There's a paradox in prosperity. When people are comfortable, they become risk-averse. When the economy provides adequately, there's less urgency to transform. Trinidad's wealth created stability but also complacency. Generational divides are opening. Older Trinidadians remember when oil wealth transformed the country. They trust what has worked. Younger Trinidadians see a world shifting. They see the environmental movement gaining strength. They see renewable energy becoming competitive. They see that fossil fuels are a 20th century solution to 21st century problems. In Jamaica, transformation is creating winners and losers, opportunity and displacement, hope and frustration. In Trinidad, stability is creating comfort and anxiety, prosperity and vulnerability. These dynamics have regional implications. Jamaica's cannabis experiment is being watched closely by other islands. Several Caribbean nations are exploring medical cannabis industries. If Jamaica succeeds, expect a green gold rush across the region. If it fails, expect others to pull back. Trinidad's challenges are regional lessons. Every Caribbean nation dependent on tourism or commodity exports faces versions of Trinidad's diversification dilemma. There's potential for cooperation. Jamaica's renewable energy expertise could be exported to Trinidad. Trinidad's financial services could support Jamaica's emerging industries. Regional supply chains could be developed, but there's also competition. Both nations pursue similar diversification strategies, competing for the same foreign investment. The Caribbean's future may depend on whether these nations see each other as partners or rivals. A fragmented region will struggle to achieve necessary scale. A united region could leverage collective strengths. Jamaica and Trinidad's paths are a microcosm of larger questions. Two nations wrestling with transformation. Two experiments whose outcomes will shape the region for generations. So where does this leave us? The truth is, we're still in the middle of the story. Neither nation has definitively succeeded or failed. The real verdict will come years from now. But some lessons are emerging. Economic transformation is never as simple as policymakers hope. Institutional capacity matters as much as strategy. Legacy industries don't simply vanish. Social impact is complex, and no nation can escape the fundamental uncertainties of a changing world. Jamaica is discovering that legalizing cannabis doesn't automatically create a thriving industry, that branding and potential don't equal markets, but also that bold moves can shift perceptions and create possibilities that caution never would. Trinidad is learning that energy wealth can be blessing and curse, that prosperity breeds complacency, that the longer you wait to diversify, the harder it becomes, but also that accumulated capital and expertise are assets that can be leveraged. Both nations are proving that small countries can be economic laboratories. Jamaica's cannabis model could become a template for developing nations. Trinidad's challenge will be faced by dozens of countries in coming decades. The Caribbean has always been a region of resilience and adaptation. From colonialism and slavery emerged vibrant cultures and determined people. From economic marginalization emerged creativity that produced outsized global influence. Now, from 21st century challenges, new forms of prosperity must emerge. Jamaica's green gold and Trinidad's black gold represent more than industries. They represent different visions of the future, different bets on what will generate prosperity in a world being reshaped by climate change and technological disruption. Different answers to the eternal question: how do we build a better future while honoring our past? Neither answer is entirely right or wrong. Both contain wisdom and blindness, opportunity and risk. The coming years will test both approaches. What we can say with certainty is this: the Caribbean's economic story is far from finished. It's being written now in cannabis fields and oil platforms, in government offices and village squares, in decisions of policymakers and dreams of young people. Jamaica and Trinidad are leading this story in different directions, and where they end up will shape not just their own futures, but possibilities for the entire region. The green gold and black gold aren't just commodities. They're metaphors for choice, for the eternal tension between innovation and tradition, risk and security, what we've always done and what we might become. And that's a story worth watching unfold, because ultimately it's about all of us, about how societies navigate change, about how people build prosperity when old certainties crumble, about resilience, adaptation, and the stubborn human refusal to accept that the future must be worse than the past. Two Caribbean nations, two forms of gold, two paths forward. The world is watching to see which shine brighter.